Aftermath of the Great Revolt of 1857. This video is brought to you by Unacademy in association with GyanCentral.com. So we know the Indian people had rebelled against the British. We also know that this had led to one of the greatest revolts in the Indian history. So just as victories against the British had earlier encouraged rebellion, the defeat of the rebel forces encouraged desertions. So after the war, what we got to see was that the British tried their best to win back the loyalty of the people. How? Well, they started announcing rewards for loyal landholders. They would be allowed to continue to enjoy traditional rights over the lands provided they listened to the British. And those of them who had rebelled were told that if they submitted to the British and if they had not killed any white people, they would remain safe and their rights and claims to the land would not be denied. Despite of all this, hundreds of sepoys, rebels, nawabs and rajas were still tried and hanged. So by the end of 1859, the British had started regaining control in the entire country. So they could not carry on ruling the land with the same policies anymore. Therefore, they decided that they need to bring out some changes. The first change was that the British Parliament passed a new act in 1858 and transferred the powers of East India Company to the British Crown itself in order to ensure a more responsible management of Indian affairs. So now we were not ruled by the company anymore but directly by the British government. Now a member of the British cabinet was appointed Secretary for State of India, and he was made responsible for all the matters related to the governance of India. He was given a council to advise him called as the Indian Council. So British cabinet member was now Secretary of State for India, who was responsible for all the matters related to the governance of India. And under him was a council. Not only this, the Governor General of India was given the title of Viceroy. Viceroy meaning personal representative of the Crown. And through these measures, the British government accepted direct responsibility for ruling India. Now the second point was that all ruling chiefs of the country were assured that their territories would never be annexed in the future. They were even allowed to pass on their kingdoms to their heirs, including adopted sons. However, they were made to acknowledge the British Queen as their sovereign paramount. And thus, the Indian rulers were to hold on to their kingdoms as subordinates of the British Crown only. So you see what was happening? The third change came as a decision to change the proportion of Indian soldiers in the army. They said that the proportion of Indian soldiers in the army would be reduced and the number of European soldiers would be increased. In fact, it was also decided that instead of recruiting soldiers from Awadh, Bihar, Central India and South India, more soldiers would be recruited from amongst the Gurkhas, Sikhs and Pathans. Now strangely, the British believed that the Muslims were responsible for the rebellion in a big way. So the land and property of the Muslims was confiscated on a large scale and they were treated with suspicion and hostility. Now this is the image of the Enfield rifle which had caused much of the unrest in the Bengal army during the start of the revolt. Now if you can recall, the soldiers were asked to use a certain cartridge that was supposedly having the fat of cows and pigs, which was against the religious beliefs of the soldiers. This thing was enough for the soldiers to rebel against the British on such a massive scale. So the British now decided to respect the customary religious and social practices of the people in India. The last rule of the British was to give security to the landlords and the zamindars. So policies were made to protect the landlords and zamindars and give them security of rights over their lands. So a new history, a new phase of history began after 1857. So now began the colonialism of India under the British government. The company rule abolished, the government took over. In our previous videos, we have mentioned about the countryside, the tribals, the peasants, what happened to them under the colonial rule. Now, what truly happened to the cities under the colonial rule, we'll be looking to in our next video.